This video is brought to you by Midway USA. Support the channel by choosing Midway for your shooting and outdoor supplies.
Daniel Defense, their step into the precision game. You ready?
Let's give it a go. We're on at 100. Impact. Impact. 200. Just down to the neckline. Nice.
Okay. 300, I'm still going to aim for the head and see how far it drops.
Okay, cool. I'm there. Fire when ready. Yeah, definitely down in the lower. That was right on the bottom.
Cool.
All right, Henry, I am on at 4.
4, I'm going to use 2 mils of a hold.
Okay, sounds good. Dead center. Very good. Very good. Nice. Stacked him up. Wow, this is an attack driver, dude. Back over to the right. 2 targets.
Right,
Target
Roger.
on the left. Impact. Just right of center. Dead center. Very nice.
Nice. Ready when you are.
All right, I'm on at 6. Impact. Impact. That second one, Henry, just off to the right.
Okay.
We got a gust coming in here.
Yeah, right to left.
Yeah, not full value though. Nice, nice. Dead center, very nice. We are on at 8, sir.
Left side.
Left side. Impact. Just left of center. Good elevation. Elevation was centered up. Dead center. Nice. All right. I am on at 9. Impact. I can't tell if it was on the low edge. I would come up 0.15 regardless. That should get you in there, yeah?
Okay.
Go ahead, fire when ready. Dead center chest. Excellent.
Okay.
Final target. We're out at $1,000, baby. Let's go.
Okay, I'm going to bump this up 0.2 mils.
Impact, lower left quadrant. Just off the right. Oh no.
I corrected it to the right because it was lower left.
Yeah, that was maybe 2/10 right of center. Yeah, there it is, baby. There it is. Impact.
Once again, Josh.
Thwarted. Thwarted by 1 round.
1 round, that's it. But we do have more precision rifles coming up this year.
Yes, and we got to compete against, race out the qualification course next to us.
So, still though, I'll be brief on this because we've got some company on range. Daniel Defense's entry into the precision market, because of course, traditionally Daniel Defense does a lot of AR-15s and semi-autos. But Josh, the famed Daniel Defense Cold Hammer Forged barrel, no slouch at all. I mean,
Absolutely not. Absolute tack driver. And one thing that I've noted handling this particular rifle is that it's deceptively lightweight.
yeah.
It looks like it's a chassis rifle, which is generally very heavy, but this definitely plays in a different ball game or different ballpark than the traditional sort of chassis guns that are floating around out there nowadays.
Yeah, I would add that I love the system, the great trigger, easily compatible with a lot of M-LOK and AR grips, etc. But one thing, if we really had to pick on anything, the bolt is slightly stickier than some other stuff. Now, granted, this is still a new rifle. This is still less than, 200 rounds that I've shot through
That's
it.
right.
So it still has a lot of break-in time. And traditionally, the Remington 700 type systems would take a little bit of time to break in to remove some of that stickiness. But since we have company on range, Josh, if you don't have anything else,
Let's head over to the debrief.
We'll see you guys over the debrief. They've said that snipers commit an act of ungentlemanly warfare. Well, guilty as charged, Your Honor. I hope you're enjoying the show thus far. Shows like this, they're brought to you by Slate Black Industries. But most importantly, we're supported by the patrons of Patreon and Utreon. That's right, this lovely group of men and women, they support us financially, intellectually, but most importantly, emotionally. So today I'd like to invite you, come, join us, become one of us. Together, we'll set our sights on the future development of small arms. But if you cannot, that's all right. We completely understand. We'd be just as happy if you were to leave us a comment right below. But for now, let's get on with it.
Are you ready? All right, here we go. Ladies and gents, welcome back into the debrief after a near perfect run. Henry, so close yet again to perfection. But, and you had the first round hit too. Makes it even more painful.
I know. Towards that run, we started getting a little bit of wind, and I just misjudged the wind call, to be honest.
Well, likewise too, right? We had a hit with it. It was left half. We went back to giving it a little bit less wind correction, and the wind took it just off the right side.
Yeah. So, what could you do? I mean, in training, that's where you work on your wind calls. But in practice, if that happened, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. So this is an interesting one because not only is it a rare occasion for us to be running a 1,000-yard course with the bolt guns, but it's not a 308 and it's not a CNR. We're running a modern 6.5 gun you can go out and get today.
Josh, I feel like there's a little bit of stereotyping there on my taste in firearms.
Never.
I enjoy the 6.5 just as much as I enjoy the 308. It's just typically at 6.5 by 55 that I shoot more than 6.5 Creed.
But very similar performance characteristics, though, yeah?
Actually, yes. And that's the 6.5 by 55 versus 6.5 Creed. Off topic is something we will delve into later on, probably a little down the road. But as far as this goes, I mean, I was about to say I was pleasantly surprised, but were we really surprised?
No, and that's a good way to segue into the conversation of any time that you pick up a rack gun, there's obviously a feel it out period where there's some doubt, you might say. There's some doubt out there where you go, I don't know, how's it going to perform? And obviously we got our answer. It's an absolute tack driver of a rifle. And to your point, would we really expect anything less from Daniel Defense? Probably not.
No, and off camera, honestly. So Josh and I were talking about this, right? The company characteristic of Daniel Defense, honestly, this is my opinion, I feel like it mirrors what Colt used to be like in the 90s. You're basically one company taking a lot of the manufacturing under its own umbrella, most notably with the barrel manufacturing. They try to keep the QC of the barrel, very tight to their standards. And by doing that, is it the cheapest item out there? No, absolutely not. It is also not the most expensive item out there. But the big thing is, out of the box is what you talks about. Out of the box. And that's right. I think when we compare, we can go into sort of the spec sheet of looking at this too. But if we compare this to the Ruger Precision Rifle that we did a couple of years ago, I think we're able to see where technology towards a precision rifle has really progressed.
Well, and it's not just technology, but the overall market for the precision rifle. When you look at this gun, this is a out of the box, does everything you would probably want for most shooters and most precision gun chassis systems on the market today. In terms of the market, the user market, in terms of what users want to do with their guns coming out of the box.
Yeah, so, I'm not saying... The Ruger Precision Rifle absolutely has its spot on the table. At that price point, it is very difficult to beat a lot of the features that it provides. And it got a lot of people into the precision long-range game. And that's a very important part of it. But what Daniel Defense did with the Delta 5 Pro, that rifle like the Ruger RPR... might I even say, with reverence, the Tic Tac A1 could even not do, is that pure out-of-the-box has absolutely everything that a 2023 precision rifle shooter would want at that price point that would be equivalent or under what you would want to pay for with an RPR or a Tic Tac A1 putting other stuff onto it. Basically,
right. The upgrades required to have it be like for like in terms of functional equivalency.
Correct. So this rifle, out of the box, I did change out the muzzle device just so I could also take suppressors if I want to. And I added the scope. Well, when I shot it, I had the normal low rings, but I've since put a spur mount on it. But everything else here, nothing has been added, nothing has been changed, nothing has been really torqued. Out of the box, what you saw on the range is exactly what you get as it comes out of the box. And that's to look at. Well, we could go down this a little bit. 5/8 by 24 threaded muzzle devices, typical 30 cal muzzle devices, drops in. A full M-LOK rail system with a Swiss Arcalock base and a top rail portion if you were to want to add a clip-on device. 20 MOA rails already attached to it. It takes ACSS magazines, so that takes away a lot of the potential reliability issues that developing your own magazine could come about with. It has your bolt knob. I was not entirely sold on this at first, but now using it for a while, I get it. It's not bad. It has an extended magazine release right here. And an AR-15 patterned pistol grip. Probably if someone changes anything out, it may be the AR-15 pistol grip. But to me, I shoot 80-year-old, 100-year-old rifles to 1,000 with no pistol grip. So it doesn't bother me as much as someone who likes to customize their stuff. And a fully adjustable skeletonized buttstock with actually way more positions than I see typically coming with some of those stock rifles at the 2,000 mark, 2,000-ish mark. And so, also the trigger, I believe it's a chimney trigger in here. And of course, the barrel is the Daniel Defense Cold Hammer Forged barrel that they come with. We can get into the barrel in a bit. I know a lot of guys would say it's not a Bartlein, it's not a... Okay, well...
I don't know, man. That thing was stacking rounds out to 500, plus, stacking them.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a performer. It absolutely is a performer. And I think when we were on range, one thing that we identified was the biggest issue that we saw was with the bolt cycling. And I've heard this from a few other influencers. But because I've shot a lot of Remingtons. And I know that when Remington bolts first come in, especially when they were like freshly coated with whatever, even if you had it not painted, but even if you had it parkerized, it would still get a little sticky. But Remington bolts are made in a way to where they do have a little bit of play when you roll it out in the back. It's not like an Accuracy International bolt. And so when you first get them, they are a little sticky. But if you use it for a while, like when we shot this rifle, it had not been broken in well. But since I have broken it in, so if you look at it now...
Yeah, super, super slick, right? Just moves under its own weight.
Yeah, so that whole thing with the bolt being sticky, it's not as big of an issue anymore. Well, it's not an issue anymore. But if you're not used to throwing the Remington bolt, I know some guys, when they apply pressure, typically you're supposed to apply pressure like towards this direction in order to engage the racetracks. But if you apply pressure outwards, it will stick a little bit. But if you're used to shooting the Remington actions, it's not an issue. So the bottom line, the Delta 5 Pro's bolt throw absolutely is stickier than your Accuracy International, Sacco, or even Tikka. However, I don't think that it's sticky to the point that it is unusable. So yes, when I shot the rifle, I did think that it was sticky and I was self-conscious about it. But upon reviewing the footage, the bolt cycling actually looks fine. I just have to get used to applying more force in the correct locations, much like how you cycle a Remington 700's bolt.
Effectively, what we're saying is that all of the features, and one that you didn't mention, but is now available, I believe, moving forward, is the hinge knuckle for the stock as well, to allow it to have a folding feature. Is that correct?
I don't think they've made them public yet, but they've announced it, and they've shown the first...
Yeah, it was that shot, I think, right?
Yeah. So the hinge, so what Josh is talking about, this hinge block right here is held with 2 screws. This hinge block will be swapped out, and you'll have a folding hinge that could then cut the entire rifle length shorter when you stow it for transportation. Much like the Accuracy International 1.5 series chassis, where you could fold the stock. So
yeah, the RPR does it, the Tikka does it, if I recall correctly. So a lot of the other rifles out there, that was one of the complaints I've heard about the DD specifically, is that it didn't have that feature. But obviously they're going to be introducing it as well. So when we look at the totality of this, it really comes down to, it ticks a heck of a lot of all the boxes. The piece that I found most interesting about it, since some of my chassis guns are a couple years older, as you guys know, I run very modern setup kits. I'm always chasing the best bits of performance. So when something becomes available, whether it's, I think I have a Masterpiece Arms chassis, I have an MDT chassis. When I got into these just a few years ago, mind you, you had to choose what the mounting solutions were going to be. So for example, my MDT system is a M-LOK system, and my MPA system is an ARCA system. These new designs where companies are rolling out the hybrid ARCA M-LOK sections that can take both Picatinny and ARCA and M-LOK are really cool. One of the best features of at least this rifle, but of others that we've also seen coming out in 2023 as well.
And if you're talking about a modularity side, and okay, before we get into that, I already see the comment section saying, "Oh, you two shills. Look, we'll talk about some Mauser in the next video, all right? We'll talk about some Enfield in the next video. Just let us get excited for a commercially available product that's out the box, nice to shoot for a change, you know?" But before I get into that, modularity is interesting. So you can see how they designed the handguard right here. It is entirely removable, and in that aspect, what you're talking about, they sort of future-proofed it for any future upgrades if they needed to. I thought that was a really smart design, and on top of that, they've also, I think, I went on their website earlier this week, and I saw that they had barrels for sale. And I know their barrels are user serviceable, so it's one of those to where you could... I believe it's like an Allen key and you can take it out.
That's pretty wild.
And so having a lot of these highly modular systems in a 2500 package it's one thing for civilians to look at this and say, do I want to compete with this or not? I mean, I find that a lot of competitors in the civilian sphere like to modify their stuff. But when I look at this, I actually see more of a law enforcement military rifle. And specifically is because if you look at agency issue or government issue items, they want that thing to perform out of the box. It's the same thing with the XM2010s that the Army uses. They don't want armorers to go back and mess with stuff. And specifically on the law enforcement side, if you need a sniper to take around on the law enforcement side, you don't want something that the armorer had installed and forgot to tighten a screw or two. The legal liability to agency use for these things is immense. And so having everything already done by a government and law enforcement geared, sort of a manufacturer who gears itself towards law enforcement and government use, that turns it into a very attractive package for the agency, the role this thing would play in an agency use in that aspect.
Right. It's worth mentioning again here is one of the things that this, although it looks like a competitive, it looks like a chassis competitive gun. One of the things it does very different from those guns comes down to the weight assessment and where and how it has weight. And a lot of the PRS systems, those that come out of competition shooting, weight is considered a positive component. More weight is good, which is very different than many military and law enforcement applications. In the case of this particular rifle, although it appears externally to fit into that role of a PRS gun, one of the pieces that it does do very different is it is very deceptively lightweight, in my opinion, at the least.
Yeah, for chassis guns, it's not bad. I mean, you're also talking about two things: weight and balance. So the balance of the rifle, as it is sort of at this point right here. But right here, where the barrier stop is. And so you add a bipod in the front and it would probably extend out here. So it's a very center point balanced rifle. But you're right. It is for a precision rifle, it's a fairly lightweight platform. And from the law enforcement, especially military side, that comes into something that's extremely important for infill, exfil, for setting up your height sight, etc. I would say it's always easier to make it heavier if you need to, because you could just screw on M-lock weights to make it heavier. But you cannot, I mean, unless you want to drill speed holes into your MDT chassis, it's harder to make things lightweight when it's already heavy. The other thing about weight is that it gives it more latitude to put a heavier scope on there. And people forget about that scopes add up a bit of the weight of the rifle. And so if you look
especially precision optics, right? Precision optics are in the well over, I mean, heck, most of them, if maybe I'm like totally wrong here, but most of them are multiple pounds.
And well, specifically, I like the primary. Like again, let's draw this clear. Josh likes his like really nice like Hales and high end Night Force attackers. I enjoy medium range scopes. I'm happy with that. Again, I'm the guy who shoots World War II optics, so this is amazing glass for my use. But the big thing about the Primary Arms PLX 6-30 that I put on here is that it's got the ACSS cammed for the 6.5 Creed. And that gives me two options to either dial, like I did on this segment, or I could use the BDC reticle to drop shots as fast as I can onto the targets if I really needed to, and not dial and just basically lock it down to 0 and just run with it. The problem with that scope, the PLX, is specifically its weight. It's heavy. It's very heavy. It's about a Vortex Razor's weight, and Vortex Razor typically is it's the gold standard of heavy scopes, I suppose. It's what a lot of people compare these things to. So having a lightweight chassis, going back to your original point, facilitates me to have more options on choosing an optic. Whereas if I were starting with an AI chassis that is extremely heavy, yes, I would not have a lot of recoil. But at the same time, if I want to be conscious of the weight, then I automatically have to remove a fair amount of optics that are out there from my consideration.
Right. And so we've now talked through sort of the overall package in terms of the rifle itself. We've talked about the optic and optic choice. I know you specifically wanted to talk about the barrel here at a little bit further detail. Obviously, we know when we go from shooting our more standard 308, the round that I jokingly opened the segment with talking about how it's so shocking that you're not shooting a 308 in this episode. But there's a reason for that, right? A lot of the shooting we do is with the 308 because it is or remains but was a core primary round utilized by the military. Thus, it falls into a large number of the rifles that we shoot on the show. But also because of the longevity it provides when you come down to discussing barrel life. And one of the bits here that I sort of my brain has been sort of swirling around on is what type of barrel life is being projected with the 6.5 on these barrels. Have you seen anything that's indicated barrel life on them?
I think so. Traditional like non-cold hammer forged barrels are typically they don't last as long. I've read anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 rounds in your toast for PRS, and that's for PRS. So in the past, we've talked about some of this, and I've done a little bit more research. And the interesting thing that I've seen is that the case pressure for the 6.5 is obviously greater than your 6.5 by 55. So having a shorter case to fit the cartridge into a 308 magazine, it gives you more pressure. I mean, smaller volume, same speed that you're running, you're going to have a higher pressure in that chamber area. And so that pressure and the heat is the main thing that wears down the throat. And so when you cold hammer forge a barrel, that gives you a better metallurgical characteristics that could extend the life of the rifle. And on that aspect, 308 does have a longer barrel life, but it does not have the same type of ballistic characteristics to it. Now, I would then contend that even if you have a lower round count for your barrel life, which 5,000 or so rounds of 6.5 Creed is a lot of rounds to send through a rifle. The fact that it is a quick change barrel, that you could buy a new barrel from Daniel Defense, that automatically solves a lot of these issues. Because
now, mind you, like again, 5,000 rounds of 6.5 Creed is what, like $10,000 worth of ammunition?
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
So
right.
So
for reference, 5,000 might not sound like a lot when you're shooting ARs, but when you're shooting bolties, it's a little bit different, right?
Now, I mean, I would also contend though that the 308 still has a place, and it's not, in my opinion, one thing, barrel life, whatever, but the big thing that 308 does bring about is the fact it is one of the best training rounds to get into precision long range stuff. It is still one of the best that I use to maintain a skill set, because it is more difficult to shoot under wind. And so I need to learn how that characteristic works even more so than a 6.5. But if I were to bring this into like a law enforcement duty use environment, and you don't want to step up to the magnums, 6.5 would be a good option, 6.5 Creedmoor, because it automatically has so much interface with different platforms. You swap a barrel and you could use it. So a lot of people like to hedge their entire personality in the 6.5 versus 308 debate. In my opinion, they are two cartridges that have equal, if not complementing, characteristics to it. Yeah. And I mean, I would encourage people, if they're looking at, do I want to be a 6.5 guy or a 308 guy? I mean, why don't you look at both and hone the skill and use it for whatever you need?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I mean, I started this whole line of thought on, is the Cold Hammer Forge in the AR world? Okay, let me just step it back and we'll wrap the session. But in the AR world, at least in the competitive world, it was widely believed that, or at least when I was coming up in competitive shooting, it was widely believed that Cold Hammer Forge barrels have greater longevity, but stainless barrels were what you would want to use for your match gun because it would be more accurate. And that was sort of like the prevailing folklore around functionally choosing your barrels on your comp gun. And in hindsight, chasing every little percentage point of accuracy or performance led me to get stainless barrels and then shoot them out. Because in that world, you could shoot stainless barrels out, mag dumping on 3-gun courses. And I wonder if that was all for naught. It's something that I want to talk about on a completely separate subject line and video. But to your point, the question about would this barrel, being Cold Hammer Forged, be able to achieve the same level of accuracy as would be needed on a precision gun? I think we obviously answered to that would be yes.
Yeah, the Cold Hammer Forged barrel nowadays, they perform just fine. I mean, on top of that, look at the other Daniel Defenses that you have, the Block 2. Excellent barrel. Also Cold Hammer Forged. But then also look at some of the other things in the industry. I believe the M24, the actual U.S. military M24, runs a Cold Hammer Forged barrel. So does the FNSPR that the FBI used for a while. It is also a Cold Hammer Forged barrel. So Cold Hammer Forged barrels being able to shoot precision, that's not a new thing. But I think a lot of times people, it's difficult to delve into these things and be able to delve into all the minutia of manufacturing. And so it's easy to come up with rule of thumbs. But then not consider whether it has any exceptions, because technology...
Right, it's discussed as Bible, right? It's a general idea that is purported as... It's grossly exaggerated and then purported as Bible. Like, at least, again, in my experience, sort of in the gun world, that's how it tends to function.
It's the same in the AK world. Cast versus forged parts. Yeah. People may be shocked that the Russians use a lot of cast parts. A lot. But anyways,
Yeah, sorry for the aside, but that was sort of where I was going with that in my head, and just I've been thinking over that and thinking back on previous me from 10, 12 years ago and going, I probably was bought into this idea way too much, which is usually the realization that we come to on this show with respect to pretty much everything that we
skill trumps equipment any day of the week. And building the skill is much more important than just purely looking at the equipment. However, if you were looking at an out-of-the-box accurate duty grade rifle for precision stuff that covers 95% of what you would need without having to go into custom work, I actually think this is a good option. Kind of like what the model that Accuracy International took with the AWs back in the day. So I like it.
All right, guys, and with that said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our session here. As always, thanks so much for tuning in with us. Go ahead and do all of the good YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe. Make sure the YouTube hasn't turned the notifications off for you. Be sure to check us out on Utreon, Patreon, Rumble, and over on 9-Hole Podcasts. And until next time, we'll see you on the range.
This is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this